Good morning. Again, we're looking at the situation in Palestine. It just won't go away. The Israelis are back to shooting people that are lining up for food. England has promised to recognize Palestine unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire, and Canada has just announced that it will do the same unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire. The problem, as I see it, is why put a condition on it? Why not recognize Palestine immediately?
France did that. Macron said he will announce that he recognizes Palestine as a state in September, which why wait is the other issue is why wait. It's just furthering the empowerment of the U.S. and the Israelis to do whatever damage they want in between the deadlines. And we're seeing that with the abuse of the food situation, airdropping food in and undersupplying of food, even though they're allowing food in, they're not allowing enough food in to offset the damage they've done with the starvation already. And that is where we have a problem when they have delays on will recognize Palestine as a state. That's basically a Trump tactic of extortion in negotiations from my point of view. That's not the way you negotiate anything. And Canada should not follow Great Britain or the UK, whatever you want to call them, in that type of wish-washy politics. You either recognize Palestine as a state or you do not. And that goes back to how you're going to deal with that situation. And the only logical means of dealing with that is actually a two-state resolution. And maybe you could give your opinion on what a two-state resolution would look like to further the peace in the area.
I think the big question is Israel will never allow a two-state solution. They've never wanted it. They don't agree with it, and they just want to move the Palestinians out. The importance of Britain in all of this is it was the Balfour Declaration in 1917 that donated Palestinian land to Israeli so-called settlers that started this whole issue. Since then, Israel obviously fought a war against the locals and carved out a chunk of
multiple wars.
It carved out a chunk of real estate for themselves, and they've just been hungry for more and more and more land, which unfortunately there are other people living on, and it's belonged to them for centuries. So a two-state solution has to be imposed. It can't be negotiated. Israel will never ever agree to that.
We need to step up. Canada needs to step up and say it's two-state solution. We recognize Palestine as a country, and by doing so, it opens up a door to settling the issues in the Middle East, because as a state, we have the ability to negotiate with independent states to come up with solutions. And just like Israel was founded on the basis of the land being given and granted and then set up its own democracy and governance, I think one of the two-state solutions is once enough countries recognize Palestine as a country and Gaza as a country, that we have the right and fortitude to move in to assist in the setting up of stable government within the country, because it is a state that is being torn apart and needs a stable foundation to move into a realistic democratic process where they can create jobs, housing stability, a future direction and a vision to have peace in the region. And that's where a bunch of countries could come in, and Israelis wouldn't have much say. If we put our police forces in place, we backed a plan for development of democracy and freedom and rights and court systems and justice systems, within the boundaries of this new state, and I don't really call it a new state because it is a state. So we need to recognize that as declaring it a state, we have a lot of power and tools we can bring to bear to help the Palestinian people move forward without having the instrument of war shoved up their backsides. And that can only be done by the world. The Israelis cannot walk into a military zone and govern with an iron fist. It never worked anywhere in the world, and it's not going to work there. It's been proven for the last 50 years. So the two-state solution is the only solution in my books, and France has got it right, other than they inadvertently delayed the timeline for their declaration. They should have declared it immediately, like Spain,
Ireland, Norway.
And Norway, yes.
But
Thank you for correcting me.
here's the thing: 147 countries out of 193 UN members have recognized Palestine as a sovereign nation. What's wrong with Canada? Like, why are we delaying on this? It's insane. You can't say that recognizing Palestine will jeopardize the peace process with Israel. The Israeli solution.
Control. It's a foreign control and interference in our government in Canada. And they did a commission on that, and they never really got to the heart of the problem, which is the U.S. owns and controls most of our policies, most of our businesses, and most of our assets. And it is very hard for politicians that require money to get elected not to have cut deals with money coming from U.S. interests. So the media and politicians have no spine in Canada, and that is where we run into the problem. So it's leadership again, and that's why a delay following the UK.
But this is also a moral issue. We're watching a genocide, we're watching a depopulation, and everyone knows that it's the intention of Israel to run these people out and tear that place down. They don't care about their own hostages.
Ethics, morals, and integrity that come into play.
Well, the thing is, I think most Canadians are in favor of stopping the genocide.
Absolutely. I don't know anybody that isn't wanting that, but they're not putting pressure on their MPs and their government to make that happen. Canada still has a role in the world as a peacekeeping nation, and I would like to see that strengthened. And by strengthening the idea that we are a multiculturalism country that can offer services to other countries that want to advance and become stable and not have the threat of war and poverty and genocide and starvation, that's what Canada should set as a goal for an international reputation. We lost that reputation the minute we joined in on the Iraq War, and especially after the fact, we find that the whole war was based on a huge lie propagated by the U.S. and U.S. interests. They were after the oil. So Canada lost its reputation. It makes it hard to deal with the issue of Palestine. And that's something history will not look favorably on, is that Canada didn't step up to stop genocide.
Even to promise to recognize Palestine is about time. But where are the sanctions? Recall how quickly the sanctions were put on Russia. And we're talking at least 18 rounds of sanctions now. Where are the sanctions on Israel? Israel is just thumbing its finger at the rest of the world. They know, Israelis know that no one is going to step up and stop them.
Well, I can tell you something about putting tariffs on goods from Israel. There's a product called SodaStream. Flooded the market here in Canada. It pushed out a business that was Canadian owned, a Canadian made product called Soda Mystic. And it's a for making pop at home. The Soda Stream is not anywhere near the quality of a pop machine that Canada made. But Soda Mystic has been pushed right out of business because the Israeli firm SodaStream flooded our market. And that is what tariffs were supposed to be designed to do, was to protect your domestic business. And here is one classic example of a country, Israel, dumping onto our market because we didn't protect our own manufacturing of Soda Mystic and promote our own business. It was a thriving business model, and it worked very well. And I bought a Soda Mystic. I actually was a distributor of Soda Mystic decades ago, and we lost out to SodaStream, and I had to shut down 3 or 4 retail outlets. I shut down the sales team. I shut down the product, and we virtually don't have any. There's a few spots where you can fill your machine for CO2 here, but we lost the market control because the government didn't protect manufacturing in Canada. And this product was far superior than a SodaStream. And that's where tariffs are actually supposed to be applied. And we need to put sanctions on Israel, and one of them would be the SodaStream. And I think Soda Mystic could rebound from putting a sanction and saying don't allow SodaStream in the country. But that's just an example. So yes, you're absolutely correct. We do need to put sanctions on products and services to the Israelis. Now, I think it was you was telling me that a few months ago that Canada sent shells, rifle shells and weapons over to the Israelis to be used in this war against a genocide. Were some of our bullets used to shoot down people in the lineups for food and aid? That's
Well,
my
it's hard.
question.
It's hard to figure out what the facts are. The news reporting was that the customs declarations in Israel show that millions of rounds of ammunition came from Canada in April 2025.
Millions. Wow.
The Canadian government says that they're not responsible for the customs declaration in Israel, and that they've banned all arms shipments to Israel. So whether or not it's a real story or a cover-up, who knows? But if we get back to the Palestinian issue and the recognition, Sweden recognized Palestine in 2014. That's a decade ago.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world should have followed. And a decade ago, perhaps recognition of Palestine would have prevented the slaughter that we're seeing today. You can't expect people to live in an open air concentration camp and not rebel.
Well, yeah, there was probably worse than an open air concentration camp. Some of the military imposition into people's lives by the Israelis, they would be handcuffed in what they could do. There'd be no future for them in that situation. What would you feel like if you were in a pathetic, landlocked area with military overseeing everything you do and being prevented from a vision for a stable future? You'd have no choice but to rebel. I don't think that's the solution moving forward at all. We have to look at it that this military concentration camp is not going to be a solution. And didn't I read somewhere that the Israelis were going to build another concentration camp of 600,000 people
to start with? To start with,
yes.
Yeah, and they're gonna build it in the middle of what is now the Gaza Strip. It's going to be a small piece of what
Right.
was once the homeland for the Palestinians, and the only way to get out is to go to a foreign country and never come back.
And that's their goal. They want to, like I said, they want to take over the land, own the land. Trump has incentivized this by saying, "Yeah, I'll build beachfront resorts for only the wealthy," and definitely they don't want to see the poverty that's existing there. And I mean, where you have poverty and imposed poverty with no hope of getting out of poverty, that was the reason for World War II when Germany had no choice but to deal with getting out of poverty. It's one of the bases of history that shows that that was the reason for World War II, or the development of it, the primal cause of it. So we should have learned by now that that isn't how you deal with states, and that's why we need to recognize it as a state and then go in and actually help it develop into a modernized economy, stable, with opportunity and a vision for a safe future. That's what Canada should be promoting, not
Well, back
turning a
back to
blind eye.
back to Canada's threatened recognition of Palestine. That came out of a cabinet meeting, so it wasn't an act of Parliament. It wasn't something that was discussed in Parliament. It wasn't a public discussion whatsoever. In other words, we're we're not compelling our elected representatives to state where they stand. In England, in Britain here, 221 members of Parliament from 9 political parties signed a letter addressed to the Prime Minister, Stromer, and the Foreign Secretary, urging them to recognize the Palestinian state. That number has risen to 255. So at least the British parliamentarians have stated where they stand. In Canada here, I cannot get a reply from my MP as to where he stands on this situation whatsoever. They will
Have you
not.
tried writing the minister, foreign minister?
Oh yeah, and I've
Yeah.
I've tried writing the leader of the Conservative Party. They don't even say thank you for your interest anymore. They just pretend that they went into Cyprus, space
Well,
somewhere
if
and
every
go and
Canadian was as passionate and as you about trying to reach out and do stuff, they would be
take
forced to
take
make a
take a
move.
position, right? Like I
Yeah,
don't, I'm not, I don't really care at this point what their position is, but they need to have one. They
yeah,
need to
public
speak
one.
about it publicly, yes.
Yeah,
And when they don't reply, I know what their position is. It's pro genocide.
right.
And they need to understand that if that isn't what they're promoting, they should stand up and say that we don't promote genocide. We don't promote ethnic cleansing. We're not in favor of what the Israelis are doing, starving women and children. That should be a no-brainer. And the Conservative Party of Canada is afraid to say that.
I guess
I
that's why we're not politicians, is because we speak our mind and people know exactly what we're about. And I'm not pulling any punches when there's something wrong doing. I'm not turning a blind eye. But a lot of politicians avoid the subject and say, oh, it'll go away, or we don't want our real thoughts to ever be known. And that's not a good formula for politics either. So I would hope Carney and his new government would step up and make their thoughts known, and so we as the voters know, are they representing us to the world properly?
have a non-binding resolution even in Parliament. Call
Yeah,
Parliament together
yeah,
and say, all those in favor of genocide, put up your hand. And record the vote. All those in favor of ethnic cleansing, put up your hand.
and
All
show the
those in
video on
favor,
the news.
all
So
yeah,
we
all
know.
those people in favor of shooting women and children when they line up for food, put up your hand,
Yeah,
right? And shame those people into at least taking a stand. And that's not going to happen.
well, that's one of the things in politics is we've modeled after the US in a lot of ways, and it's been a degradation of our system over the last 30, 40 years. And we need to recognize that that's not the way we as a country want to operate or envision ourselves. And we don't want the world to see us like our counterparts to the south. And now's the time to show the distinguishing characteristics of Canadians and our government. And that is saying we don't want genocide at all. And we need to put sanctions and make a stand. And like you said, anybody that doesn't make a stand, that means you're in favor of killing women and children and people standing in line for aid. And you should be ashamed of yourselves.
I
I can't even imagine not standing up for that.
I can't understand how this last 2 years hasn't ripped apart Israeli society. As young people being drafted into the military, being forced to kill innocent women and children, you think that there would be some moral outrage amongst the soldiers themselves. There should be international criminal court proceedings against the generals, the colonels, the sergeants, the people
I
who
mean,
are
this
shooting.
this event should have been over and done with a month after it started, and the world should have stepped in and said, hey, we'll send in peacekeepers, we'll do this, we'll set up the two-state resolution or solution to the problem. And instead, it's been, what, a year and a half now of dragged out genocide. And it's a lack of government stepping up over the entirety of the issue. And it goes back to 10, 15 years ago, too. Had the governments of the world stepped up, this probably wouldn't be a problem today. And that lack of response is not acceptable anymore. We've seen the end result of lack of response, and now it's just going to be like a mouse on a treadmill. It's going nowhere, but it's really spinning past, and eventually the wheel's going to fall off, and what are we going to be left with? It's not a good scenario. I think Canada should take a lead role, join Macron in his declarations, and speed it up. Say, no, we recognize them right now. We recognize Palestinian state immediately. There's no waiting a month, waiting a year. It's right now. We recognize it. Pass a resolution in Congress or the whatever house, and do it.
This is what Netanyahu said. Starmer rewards Hamas's monstrous terrorism and punishes its victims. In other words, Netanyahu views, the Jews as victims and being compelled to kill over 60,000 people. Now they know that the people that they're killing, 90% or more of them are innocent victims.
Exactly.
You never see a picture anywhere of Hamas terrorists carrying weapons, and I don't think they have any. Thing is, we know they don't have drones that can fire rockets. We know they don't have tanks. We know they don't have jet planes. With 500-pound bombs. So how is recognizing Palestinian rewarding Hamas's terrorism? I think not taking sanctions against Israel immediately is rewarding the genocide. I think it's got to be done quickly rather than not so quickly. Israel's foreign minister says the UK move harms efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza and a framework for the release of hostages. Like, what peace process? You're going to slaughter people and lock them up in smaller and smaller concentration camps until they're all gone. And that is your idea of a peace process if you're an Israeli. It's not anti-Semitic, it's anti-genocide. You cannot do this. And it's unfortunate that our government, most governments around the world, and in particular the US government, doesn't have the stones to protect people internationally. And it's shameful, absolutely shameful. Our government should hold a vote. We should find out where our elected officials stand, and then we should be able to deal with them in the next election, broom them out.
You hear that, Carney? Make that happen. We want to know your position. We want to know all your minister positions. We want to know all your MP positions on that. And we'd like to hear what the other opposition parties' positions are on that as well. It's not a hard ask. It's pretty easy. I'll hold a vote. And you can do that immediately. And then post it all across CBC so we know as voters where you stand on genocide, killing of women and children, and the allowing of the Israelis and never being sanctioned, and where's these sanctions going to happen on an international level, and why isn't the U.S. maybe being sanctioned for supplying arms and support to genocide? You can't turn a blind eye anymore. The world is watching. History is going to be made in the next while. Over the last year, we've watched genocide and sat idly by. Now you have a person running the U.S., a felon. You have a person being accused of fraud and stuff running Israel. Why are we allowing our countries and the world's citizens to have to deal with these people and totally ignoring dealing with them? Time to get off the fence. Pick a side, take a stance, do what you were voted in to do. Can you add to that there, Cal?
Yeah, it'd be
Quit
nice
being
not,
greedy. It's all
it would,
about
it would,
money.
it would be nice. It would be nice not to have a discussion about this anymore. It would be nice to think that there was some humanitarian revolution in Israel where they agreed to feed people. Apparently there's no baby formula, which just works perfectly for the Israelis because
Yeah,
the
genocide.
babies dying off just means there's not future terrorists in their opinion. Not providing medical treatment for the people they've wounded works perfectly for them.
I
You
heard
know,
on
don't have to kill them twice.
I think I heard on 660 News yesterday where there was some people waiting to come to Canada on visas from Gaza, and one of them was killed or something while he was waiting him and his family were waiting to come over here. We have extended, I think, 5,000 visas to come here, or they have not fast-tracked the paperwork, and people that have applied are not getting their hearings to come over here or aided to get over here to get out of Gaza. It's a program supported by those with families already in Canada, and that is reason enough to be concerned that slow tracking families, bringing family out of harm's way is not the Canadian way. That is not something I'm proud of. I think it's a shame that families over here trying to help their family over there get away from the genocide is being red taped by our federal government for not opening up and getting the people over here, then dealing with their visa applications. There's got to be some common sense at the federal level that there is a time and place for speeding things up, and I think a genocide is one of those times. So get your head out of your arse there, Carney, and start making things happen and fast track it.
It's gotten so bad in Israel that Marjorie Taylor Greene is making statements about it being a genocide. Now, there's a woman whose concept of reality is right out to lunch for the most part. I mean, she's a hardcore mega whatever madman Trump supporter, and when she comes out and says there's a problem, there's a problem.
The other issue we have is that, and there has been only 616 Gazans as of when this article was written. I'm not sure when it was written, but it was January of 2025. So it's an outdated article, but there were only 616 Gazans arrived in Canada through temporary visa program, meant to bring in 5,000. Now that is quite a poor showing for the number of people that have made it under these visas to get them out of harm's way. And what they had to do was they would have to get across to Egypt to do biometric verification that they are indeed family members and not part of some terrorist organization. So when we're talking about Canada not pulling its weight, that is one area that we can see that we brought in, well, Alberta claims to have 80,000 Ukraine people here avoiding the war in Ukraine and Russia. So the least we could do is try to bring the 5,000 over as fast as possible and remove the red tape to bring them into the country. This is something that Carney and his new government should be able to do. They should be able to fast track it. And anybody with family over here should qualify. So we should see even a more than 5,000 temporary visa program to get people out of harm's way. That's what I would like to see. Whether it happens or not, it depends on how much influence the U.S. and Israelis have over our government. Because it's obviously something holding us back, because as decent human beings, this would already have been done without question. So my thing to viewers is, what do you think is preventing our federal government from going to the aid of Gazans in a war situation where genocide is happening? I'd like to hear from people on that, as a matter of fact. And I'd like to hear what my MP and every MP across the country has to say on that. So what's your opinion? Well, I pretty well know your opinion, but
Well, I thought it was news already that Canada had decided to recognize Palestine, but according to the recent CBC reporting, Carney's having a virtual cabinet meeting Wednesday afternoon to discuss the situation. Well, that's this afternoon, so it isn't a done deal, according to the CBC recent reporting. I thought Canada had already agreed to the two-state solution and recognizing Palestine.
And that's, the influence is coming from somewhere. And in the terms of negotiation for this tariff, is Trump putting pressure because he heard what the government was supposedly going to do as a stance against Israelis and protect Gaza? Trump does extortion as part of his dealings, and we don't always hear what the negotiations are. They only give us what they want or what Trump wants us to hear. So when you're having a double shuffle go on, it leads you to believe something is going on behind the scenes. And I don't trust Trump not to be involved in our Canadian position on Gaza. I think he's trying to throw his influence into the ring and saying, if we take a stance on genocide that interferes with his beachfront resort, he's going to slap us with even higher tariffs, which means, so be it. But we as Canadians should see what we're dealing with to the south, and with the U.S. and citizens of the U.S. that would elect a felon to lead them. So that's my take, that why this meeting might actually be going on.
I just worry about the political influence of Israel in Canada. I know it dominates U.S. politics. The Israeli lobby is a huge source of income for most, American politicians, and they're afraid to buck the money. In Canada, it's a lot more subtle, and it hasn't quite been exposed to the same degree, but obviously it's there. If the politicians are afraid to say anything, and when they do, they get labeled as anti-Semitic, where they're anti-genocide. There's a power, there's a hand behind all of this that needs to be exposed.
In February 20th, 2025, so this year in February, 11 Gazan families sue the government of Canada over delaying these temporary visas to Gazans. And that should tell you right there about the influence over the government. If Gazan families feel they're being delayed and slowed and their families' lives endangered needlessly by the federal government, there is a problem. And to fast track temporary visas, especially only a small amount, like 5,000 visas, is a small amount to what, I mean, we bring in 400,000 people every year. So 5,000 is relatively small. That shows that there's outside influence in our government. And that we have to root out, and we all know where it's coming from. It's coming from the US, and we do need to deal with that issue. And ignoring that fact is not going to deal with it. So all this tariff war that Trump's putting on, we have to be very cautious moving forward in our dealings with the US, and we have to regain some of our credibility on the world stage. Fast tracking Gazan family members over to Canada would be one of those priority missions that Carney's government should be doing.
Well, I just typed in Jewish lobby in Canada and it came up with the Canadian Jewish Advocacy Group. The front of their webpage says, "Tell the Prime Minister real peace equals no terrorist state." So they've already started the lobby against against the two-state solution.
Yeah, well, what they're saying is, in essence, is we want to take and remove all the people out of there, and we love Trump's idea of beachfront real estate and properties and moving the wealthy people of the world to come there and spend their money.
Here's how the propaganda starts off. 20 years ago, Israel left Gaza completely and handed the territory to the Palestinian leadership. Rather than build positive conditions for statehood, Hamas turned Gaza into a terrorist pseudo-state. It brutalized Gazans, it massacred Israelis, and it ignited this painful war on October the 7th. So it's the fault of the Palestinians, right?
Sure, throw me in a concentration camp and limit my abilities and my income and my food and my ability to travel, and no vision for the future. Probably a police state where I'm getting the shit beat out of me if I miss a curfew or whatever. I think I'd be a little bit rebellious. I don't know too many rednecks from Alberta that wouldn't be, and if you say you wouldn't be, I call you a frickin' liar right to your face, because there's no way we would tolerate that abuse. I'd rather die than tolerate that kind of abuse, and I guess that's probably what would have happened to me if I was in Gaza.
This is their take on Carney. A Palestinian state must only come when it is genuine peace and acceptance of Israel. Prime Minister Carney himself stated that a Palestine state must be free from Hamas and must be Zionist, affirming Israel's right to exist in safety as a Jewish state. Now, yeah, well, that's what the Canadian Jewish lobby is promoting. They also say it's time for the Prime Minister to uphold that position and take a clear stand for peace. Now, everybody can agree on that, because hollow statehood recognition will only reward and embolden Hamas as it continues to hold hostage and perpetrate the war it started. That's what they're saying.
That's pretty good propaganda.
Yeah.
I think declaring Palestine as a state and moving, towards having multi countries come in and aid to build the country up instead of tearing it down and leveling it would be the solution. And that would also help deter any development of terrorist cells and organizations within the country, because if you have a vision for a future and everything is being aided and helped to create that stability and future, you have something to rally around other than, subversive acts to try to get even with your enemy or fight to have freedoms and rights. So we as a free world can step in and do a policing action and help raise the level of living standard of Gazans and make it very a future that they could look forward to. That's the role Canada can do, not saying they got to recognize Zionists and be this and that. You got to get along with your neighboring countries, but your neighboring countries also have to get along with you. And that implementing a genocide tactic is not getting along with your neighbor. And that, you know, I'm not saying that two wrongs make a right. I'm not saying one wrong should be allowed. I'm saying that the root of the problem is the conditions that they're living in and under, and an open concentration camp will never result any different results than they've given now. To recognize it as a state allows it to grow in the direction of a democratic country, to have a vision, stability, and a future. The Israelis are not allowing that with a concentration camp or genocide or moving all the people out to have their beachfront property. I'm sure Trump wouldn't want to build a beachfront resorts with poverty all around it, because he's not going to draw in all the wealthy people from around the world to party there, and you know, it won't be a great place for him to invest. Well, I don't think he would invest in it. He'd have everybody else invest in it, just in case it went bankrupt like all his other great ideas.
I hope you don't mind. I just signed you up for the CIJA newsletter.
Oh, thank you. What am I expecting?
I don't know.
Oh, thanks. I really love them.
Well, we'll find out.
Okay, then, yeah, we'll find out. Too much time between me talking and you talking, you get me in trouble. Okay, so has that covered the topic as good as we can? I think I'm done.
So am I.
Okay.
Hopefully we don't have to continue talking about this, you know, forever. But I think sanctions have to be implemented immediately. You know, whether or not you call a two-state solution when in reality it's the same old. Start putting the sanctions on.
Exactly. Okay, on that note, I'd like to hear comments from all you viewers, and let us know what you think in the comments, and hit that subscribe button. It's free. Of course, you have to listen to him and me, but hopefully we make it interesting, new perspectives and concepts that you won't find anywhere else. I'm pretty sure of that, but we will read the comments and try to respond. So thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.